Hi everyone. Thank you for joining me for this month's Stampin' class by mail. I'm Gina Wieselman of MySweetPaper.com, and I can't wait to show you how to stamp and assemble this month's cards using the Wildflower Birthday Suite by Stampin' Up. If you ordered a class by mail kit, go ahead and pull out all of those parts and pieces now. Visit my website, linked in the video description, to access the full supply list if you're cutting your own supplies. You'll also need the stamp set, ink pads, and other supply items shown here. If you need any supplies, use this month's host code or designate me as your demonstrator to qualify for all of my promotions, including receiving 3 completed cards from my collection with every order of $50 or more. Click subscribe on this YouTube channel so you don't miss any of my upcoming videos, and reach out anytime you have questions or would like to chat more about Stampin' Up. Let's get started. Our first design is the Make-A-Wish card. If you ordered a class by mail kit, go ahead and pull out these parts and pieces. If you didn't order a kit, pause the video here, prep everything you need, and come back when you're ready to stamp and assemble. We are going to get started with our stamping, but before we actually do the stamping, I wanted to just pull out the Bright Borders stamp set. This is what we'll be using for that awesome border image, the floral border here. And this is such a fun set. So I just wanted to highlight that and how beautifully it coordinates with the To The Point label punch. We will go ahead and get started with our stamping. We'll start with our Pool Party ink pad. And we're going to be stamping this front image for the label. It's a little hard to see the contrast, so I'm going to just put a darker piece of paper, cardstock, behind it, and then pull out the stamp set from the Bright Borders and go ahead and stamp on this basic white piece that was already punched. I'm grateful for the photopolymer stamps because that looks pretty darn good. And having that contrasting paper really helps with accurate placement. That is it for Pool Party. Next, I'll go ahead and bring out our Pretty in Pink ink pad. And that's what we're going to use for the Make-A-Wish stamp. Now I'm going to just turn this ink up. And now I'm looking for where those dots are to kind of center left and right and top to bottom. Looks good. That's all the stamping for the front of the card. If you want, you can get out the inside panel for the card, and I'm just going to stamp this cute little banner at the top of that, just for a fun little touch. And of course, if you want to stamp anything on the envelope, feel free to do that now as well. With our stamping complete, it is assembly time, so I'm going to bring out my Pool Party card base and crease that with my bone folder. And then the 2 pieces that will be going on the front, on this left side. Now, I want to note, I often cut these just a little bit long, just so that you don't end up with any gaps. So rather than adhering these 2 together first and then putting that whole assembly on the card, I recommend doing it one at a time so that you can trim. So I'll just use my Stampin' Seal adhesive for this. And placement maybe about a ½ inch or so from the left of the card. There's flexibility on this. You just want to make sure that you are exactly lining it up with one of the ends of the card. And then it goes straight. Looks good. And now I'll bring out my paper snips, and like I said, just trim this up right away. Then I'll come back with the cake paper. This Designer Series paper is so beautiful. I absolutely love the gold accents on all of the sheets. And once I get this placed, I will show you one other really cool thing about the paper. Okay, and once again, I'll just trim this really quickly. All right, So like I said, I want to just show you the Wildflower Birthday Designer Series paper. Really fun patterns. We have a side with gold foil and a side that's complementary without. But the thing that I wanted to highlight was two specific pieces of this paper. This is the first one, and there's no perforations on this, so the back side is just a pattern that you can use. But look at how wonderful these are in terms of ready to make cards. You know, you just cut these panels and you can stamp your image, or you can put pieces together, or this cake image, the balloon image, you know, add a greeting, and you have a card front basically ready to go. So this is really fun. Now this is the other piece that I want to highlight, and these actually are die cut images. So once again, and I have a piece of paper poking through here. Once again, you have all of these elements, some of them quite large, and really fun to make some cards nice and easy. So I just wanted to point that out, that this Designer Series paper package, the Wildflower Birthday one, is really fun and would make for some quick and easy and still stunning cards. Okay, back to assembly. Let's go ahead and put our center panel in while we have that. I think that looks good. Just center this up, left to right, top to bottom. Okay, and then for this panel, what I did is I just have a pretty in pink one cut for you, punched for you. And I'll just use my paper snips to cut that in half down that center. And we're just going to take this and apply it right to the back of the basic white punched image, just to add a little bit of a backing and some dimension to it. Okay. I am going to use my Stampin' dimensionals to attach this to the card. And I'm usually pretty generous with these. I'll go with 4 of them. I'm sure you could get away with fewer, but this is what I'll do. And then placement wise, I'm just putting this to the right, the lower right. You can play around with what you think looks good. And then our finishing touch is the party dots. So you got 3 of them with your kit, either 1 large and 2 small, or 2 large and 1 small. So I'll go ahead and place these. And what I'm doing is I'm going to put the 2 different sizes above the greeting. Oh, that one is really sticky on me. Okay. And then whichever third you have, whether it's a large or a small one, put below the greeting by itself. And that concludes our first design. Our second design is the Hooray for You card. Go ahead and pull out these parts and pieces. Once again, we are going to start with our stamping. This time we'll be using our Blueberry Bushel ink. And we're going to be stamping on this banner or pennant image, which was already cut using the dies. Now, in terms of stamping, this is actually 3 different stamps, Hooray for You. And I experimented with trying to mount them all on one block, but I found that I didn't get the placement quite how I liked it. So instead, I'm going to stamp them separately. And I found it works best if you start with the U stamp toward the bottom. And so we want it not centered. We definitely want it toward the bottom right. And then I'm going to come back with the Hooray stamp. Now the 4 stamp is pretty tiny, so you don't have to worry too much about saving space for that. I'm just thinking more about how I want these to be spaced apart. And then I'll come back with the 4 stamp and just kind of tuck that in. I just re-inked this stamp pad, so I'm hoping that I get, okay, that's a pretty even image. That is it for stamping, unless you'd like to add something to the inside of the card or the envelope, in which case go ahead and do that now. All right, let's go ahead with assembly. We are going to just be using our standard Stampin' seal to mount these Designer Series paper pieces onto the Blueberry Bushel. So you have 3 Designer Series paper pieces. Note that the pattern is the same for these 2, so you'll get 2, If there's a rough edge from cutting, you can pay attention to that. Otherwise, they are exactly the same size. And I'm going to start at the bottom and just adhere this first piece, aiming for about equal borders on the 3 sides. And then I'm going to apply my adhesive to the one for the top and use that same placement strategy. So just aiming for about the same border on those 3 sides. Then I'll come back with the third and final panel and add that in the middle. And I like to do this because that gives me a little bit of flexibility. You know, nobody's going to notice if the middle doesn't have exactly the same borders, but I do like to make sure that it's equal on both sides of the middle one, even if they're not perfectly equal across the whole card. All right, with that complete, let's go ahead and bring out our thick basic white card base. Again, we'll just use the bone folder for a nice crisp fold there. And we'll mount this piece, again, just using regular Stampin' Seal. So I'm going to just center this on the card. Okay. Next, I'm going to bring out this banner that we stamped. And once again, I'm going to use my Stampin' Dimensionals to pop that up. So I'll just peel those release papers. And then for placement of this, I want it to line up with the top of the blueberry bushel. So that's what I'm going for there. And then our finishing touch is the bow. And this uses the gold open weave trim, which is really fun. You'll see it on our next card design as well, but it's just a beautiful shimmery trim. And as soon as I saw it, I noticed how easily it collapses on itself. And so I thought, you know, I have to tie a bow with it and see how that looks. And I really like it. It keeps enough of the bow shape, but also has a little bit of movement and flow to it. So I'm going to use a mini glue dot to adhere this. So I'll just get one of those on the back and then position it on this panel. Now, if you need to do any trimming, you can absolutely get your paper snips out and trim a little bit. Shouldn't need to trim too much, but just in case. Now I have little gold flecks everywhere. Okay, and there is our second card design. Our third card design is the Wildflower birthday card. Go ahead and pull out these parts and pieces. Now for this card, I am going to go ahead and do something that I don't usually do, in that I'm going to start assembling the card before I actually do the stamping. So this can be a little bit risky because if I mess up the stamp, I can't just flip the white over and try again. So if you are not feeling comfortable with this, you can certainly just kind of lay out the pieces to get a sense of where everything is going to go and then approximate your stamp. But I'm feeling okay about it, so I am going to go ahead and go for it. So I'm going to start with this piece of Designer Series paper for the bottom portion of the basic white. And I will note that you received 2 of these identical basic white pieces with your kit. One is just for the inside. So go ahead and use either one of those. And then I'll trim the excess from the back. Next, what I'm going to do is actually take this open weave trim and adhere it to the back of this piece. Now, what I did is I folded it in half so that I had a good amount sticking out. This piece is going to go on top of it as well. So what I found to work the easiest was just to take this piece of Designer Series paper and run a pretty generous line of Stampin' Seal across what is the bottom edge, so below the scallops. Then I took this piece, folded it in half, And I positioned it so that there was maybe a little more than 1/4 inch sticking out from the bottom. I applied some nice pressure to that, and then I went ahead and added a little bit more Stampin' Seal. And now I will put this on the card front. Okay. And you can kind of play around with this. This piece is going to go on top of it, so you can adjust how much is sticking out. I might crinkle a little bit up. And you have a little bit of flexibility with this, because I do recommend then bringing it around to the back and just securing it with some Scotch tape. So if it got to be a little too much, you can just kind of crunch it up a little bit before you adhere that. I'll do the same thing on the other side. Just crinkle it up a little bit and bring it over. Okay, now that designer series paper was a little bit too long, so now that the ribbon is secured, I'll go back and trim that. I just didn't want to end up cutting the trim and leaving any jagged edges. Okay, now we have our placement with this. Next, I'm going to add the gold foil sheets, and you definitely are going to want multi-purpose liquid glue for this. And I found it easiest to just put a little bit right up along the edge of the designer series paper, and then add the gold foil. And I'll do the same on the bottom. And you definitely do not need a lot of this glue. It does dry very securely. So I'll go like that. And you may need to add pressure just a little bit longer on this top one, since it is adhering kind of through that trim. So just hold some pressure on it a little bit longer than usual, and then it should be fine. I had no issues with it sticking once it got past that kind of initial adherence. Okay, now that that is looking good, I'm going to bring back my paper snips and just cut these little ends. And it looks like, okay, I think that is fine. Maybe a little bit more. Okay, now that we have this panel ready, I am going to bring out my Pretty in Pink ink pad. And like our last design, the happy birthday greeting is actually 2 separate stamps. So I found it easiest to start with the larger stamp, just in terms of placement, so that I make sure to get that relatively close to that bottom gold foil. And then I'll come back in with the happy and just kind of tuck that right up here. Okay, that's it for stamping, unless you would like to add something to the inside panel or the envelope. All right, let's go ahead and continue with assembly. So we'll take this panel and add some Stampin' Seal. I'm going to be a little more generous than usual around the trim area, just to make sure that that all adheres nicely. And then the Pretty in Pink is cut to have a pretty narrow border. So just go for equal border on all 4 sides. And then we'll go ahead and bring out our Pool Party card base and the bone folder to give that a nice crease. And we'll use our regular Stampin' Seal again to adhere this panel. All right. While we're doing the big pieces, I'll pull out that other basic white panel here, and we will get that ready to go for the inside of the card. And then finally, we will bring out our embellishments. So with your kit, I die cut 3 of these little flowers using the dies, and I just use mini glue dots to adhere them. Since they have the little hole in the middle, I prefer not to use liquid glue because I don't want it to spurt through that little hole. So I put 1 up in this corner and 2 in the lower corner. And I kind of overlapped those 2 a little bit. And then you also have the party dots in the 3 different colors. And so you'll just put those at the center of each flower, making sure that each flower gets a center that is different than the color of the flower itself. And there is our 3rd card design. Follow the link in the video description to access this month's Class by Mail post on my website. It includes the full supply list, as well as a link to a curated Pinterest page with even more ideas for how to use this month's supplies. You can also find more information about next month's Class by Mail on my website. If you're not already on my email list, go to tinyurl.com/mysweetpaperemail to sign up, and you'll receive monthly emails with new class information. I always love to hear from you, so leave a comment on this video and let me know what you thought of the designs. Until next time, happy stamping.